All right, back in the basement again today to talk about knee sleeves. Now, I've done a lot of sleeve videos over the course of the past year, talking about stiff knee sleeves and what I like about them, what I don't like. I've done individual videos on some brands, while others I've incorporated into training logs. I thought in today's video, I'll take a look at the ones that I have, that I use most frequently. That way you're able to kind of compare them all together. I will give you a chart, which I'll probably show on the screen right about now. I will maybe link this in a Dropbox or somewhere where you can access it if you want to. Or again, I will be referencing these numbers throughout the course of this video to help give you some insight when trying to make that decision on which sleeve is best for you. Now, some caveats, if you will. Again, this is my anecdotal opinions based off of what I prefer and what I like and my own experience with the sleeves. Your experiences may differ, but again, I think this is going to be helpful when trying to take a look at all of these sleeves across the board. And although I am providing you with some numbers and some feedback based off of my scale, my tape measure, that kind of thing, there are some things that you can't measure. So like compression, for example, in my setting here, I can only give you my feedback on, oh, these felt tight, or these were a bit more stretchy, these were a bit more stiff. So again, take this with a grain of salt. But that being said, let's jump right into it. All right, so portions of these videos, I will be referencing the laptop here with all the numbers on the chart that I have, and I'll share with you guys. But I want to kick off with the SBD sleeves because they are a bit of an outlier. Most of the sleeves we're going to talk about today are considered stiff sleeves. These are not, and I don't think SBD would be mad at me for saying that because their big thing is compression and not just stiffness and density. They gave me the analogy recently that you could have a piece of PVC pipe on your knee, which is going to check the box in terms of the weight, the density, the stiffness, all things I look at here, and I'm gonna give you feedback on for all these sleeves. But then they asked the question, would that allow you to squat more? And the answer to that is no, because if you can't move your knee, you're not going to get a good rebound or anything out of those sleeves, or if you're able to use them at all. Bit of an extreme analogy, but I'm picking up what they're putting down, and they're going after compression with their sleeves, which is really evident when you take a look at some of the specs behind these. So while the average length of these is right in line with all the other sleeves we'll take a look at today, the sizing for me that fits best is a size medium. But the big telling thing with this is the weight of the sleeves. On average, each sleeve weighs a ½ pound, so roughly 1 pound combined, where, as you'll see on some of these other sleeves that we bring up, almost every other sleeve weighs up to 1 pound each. So a 2 pound combined total. So these are about half the overall weight and density, if you will, of some of the sleeves we're going to talk about. So these sleeves themselves, they retail for $125 before shipping or tax, whatever that is. I'm not going to cover that in this video. As of right now, I believe this is the only color available, but knowing SBD, they will have other lines and colors available as they release. It may be, I'll double check at the time of publishing this. But these are a good sleeve if you're looking for something along the lines of the last generation sleeve, are really interested in compression and don't want something that's going to be super tight or super stiff or rough on the back of your legs. These are the new SBD sleeves. All right, so the next sleeve I want to talk about is from Hansu. And you guys know me, I like a lot of Hansu things when it comes to equipment, their bars, their weights. I have their combo rack right off to the side of me. However, they also sent me a pair of their stiff knee sleeves. Now, some things to call out with this, of all the sleeves I'm going to cover, these are the shortest in overall length. These ones, which are a size large, come in at 10 3/4 inch length. Everyone else I'm going to talk about today are 11 inches or more. That being said, these larges for me are actually a little bit too big. I think sizing appropriately, I would need to get a medium to wear these because when I use these as is, they tend to fall down a lot on my leg and I tend to have to pull them up quite a bit. Part of that is due again to the shape. This is the contoured knee design, if you will. I prefer more of a cone or a consistent taper from top to bottom. So number one is the shape. Number two is the size. I just found that these did not fit well. And I'd also worry that sizing down to a medium would potentially also decrease the height or length of these even more. And for me, on a knee sleeve like this, I like a little bit of a longer or larger sleeve in length regards because I get more coverage on my knee from my quad to my calf, and I feel like it gives me more support. So this is the shortest overall. As terms of the weight go, it's also on the lighter side compared to some of the sleeves that we're going to talk about. It comes in like the bottom 3 or 4 of sleeves we'll be looking at. Again, refer to the chart that I'm looking at right now. But average sleeve weight for these were about, 0.875 of a pound. So not yet a full pound, almost 9/10 of a pound, but still on the lighter side comparatively speaking to some of these other sleeves. And again, they might be even lighter if I had to size down. Now, the big selling point on these for me is the actual price. So these are $107, I believe, with free shipping. I said I'm not going to get into the shipping costs or whatnot, but I believe it's free shipping on here. $107, which puts them towards the most affordable sleeve. But again, based off of the way that they're sized and the way they fit my leg, I don't end up using these very often. All right, so next we're going to talk about the Titan TKS sleeves, which there's a lot of hype around because they are that contour knee design, but they also have this side stitching, which a lot of people find ideal or think they will like more because they say, hey, the stitching's on the side, it's not in the back of my knee, it won't hurt my knee as much. And just so you know, for context, a lot of people complain about these stiff sleeves and having rear stitching because that's going to rub against the back of your knee, which tends to be a tender spot. And that's where you can develop things like cuts, even if your sleeves are super tight or super stiff in that regard. And I get it in theory, like, oh yeah, hey, there's these side stitches, but there's still a rear stitch on here. So I mean, these aren't any different in terms of where the stitch is in the rear than the Hansu or even the Inzers that we'll take a look at. So I don't find that the side stitching personally adds anything for me. Now, in terms of some other things about these sleeves in particular, these ones are an extra large. They are too big for me. If the Hansu were big, these are way too big, and I literally have no issues getting these on and off. Titan was going to send me another pair, which they did, but they sent it to an old address, and then they stopped responding to me when I asked them if they could resend it or figure out how to fix it. It is what it is. But again, these would be too big for me in most cases, even when sized appropriately, again, because of the shape of this compared to my leg. But if you have big calves, big quads, small knees, this is generally the shape you want to go with. The length on these is right around average at 11 1/8 inch. The weight on these, however, is better than the Hansu. Each of these come in a little bit over 1 pound each. However, when I take a look at how these compare to the rest of the sleeves in other categories, these are the most expensive ones on my list at $139 before shipping and tax. So if you're going for these because you think the side stitch is going to alleviate any knee issues in the back, I would say you're mistaken in that regard. But again, if you're looking at these, I would also probably look at something like the Inzers, which we'll take a look at next. All right, so next we have Inzer, which are the ones that really kickstarted for a lot of people in this stiff knee sleeve game. I think they were the first out. Some key things about this. Number one, first of all, it is that same knee contour design that we've seen in the last couple of sleeves. In terms of overall length, these came in right at 11 inches for a size small. So of all the sleeves I'm going to cover today, these are technically by size the smallest, size small, that I own. But again, don't rely on that information. Rely on how your leg measurements compare to the manufacturer and their suggested size chart. But 11 inches, so right around the same size as the Titan. But again, in this case, when we take a look at the weight, they're both averaging out to be right under a pound. So not much less than the Titan. But again, the overall sizing of this is a struggle to get on and off, which how I think stiff sleeves should be. The Titan, if I had to size appropriately, we might lose some of that overall weight and whatnot. So these ones, in my opinion, are better than the Titan in my own personal use. Again, there is a rear stitch here being the only stitch. And for a lot of this style of sleeve, if you have a normal taper from quad to knee to calf like I do, the best thing to do in most cases for these, or the thing you have to do, is size down. At least I did. I had to size down these super small, so they're super annoying, because otherwise, based off of my leg shape and the contour with the flare on the top and the bottom, they always slide down. Even though these are extremely tight and take a long time to get on and off, they do still slide down eventually over time, which is why I'm not a big fan of this particular shape of knee sleeve. But I think if you're in the contour knee sleeve leg group, I do think the Inzers offer some of the best sleeve in that regard. Now, some cons with the Inzer, let me talk about it. Number one, the price is one of the most expensive, again, $135 before shipping and tax. Chances are after shipping and tax, they're going to be around $150. Again, I said I didn't want to get into that, but that's something that irks me with Inzer. Not only the price of these ends up creeping up a lot with shipping and tax, like $20 in most cases, but also the shipping time from Inzers directly is terrible. So if you're going to buy these sleeves, buy them from Amazon when they're in stock, because chances are you get them in a couple of days versus buying from Inzer, which could be a couple of weeks. Is there anything else I want to tell you about these sleeves? Maybe. I've heard from secondhand feedback from people who have owned the Inzers and had these rip or tear, or they wanted to get a different size because they wanted a bigger size, a smaller size, whatever the case may be. They've said they've ordered them, they've got them in, and they've found that the stiffness is different. They asked me if there is a material change, not to my knowledge, but I have heard from multiple people that they've had issues buying a second pair where it doesn't seem comparable to the first. So keep that in mind if you're looking at Inzers. All right, so next sleeve I want to talk about are the Iron Rebels, and these are what I consider a more traditional tapered sleeve. So it's bigger up top and it has a consistent taper down to the calf opening. For me, these are what fit my leg the best. And I think oftentimes with people coming over from the last generation of knee sleeves, this shape is probably what you're most accustomed to. So let's talk a little bit about these overall. As far as the length goes, these are on the higher end of the length spectrum in terms of the sleeves that we're looking at. In fact, I think they are tied for the second longest sleeve brand that I own. These are a size large. These are what I would still consider a little bit on the small side for me. So I could probably fit in an extra large. They might be a little bit on the bigger side, but in some cases, if you're looking at these type of stiff sleeves for everyday use or rep work, that might be something you're more interested in, and keeping something super tight like this more for 1 rep max attempts, because these are the type of sleeve, at least sized accordingly, or smaller in this case, that over long sessions without having to fold them down or anything, you will start to lose feeling in your feet. Again, that's more anecdotal and based off how you size, but that's just something to be aware of. Again, what are the things I want to harp on, and I'm going to continue to do it. Make sure you size accordingly to the size chart, because we've seen size small. We're going to see some double XL, some XLs, medium, some. I'm all across the board in all these different sleeves, which is why I say you should not compare company to company and just instead use that sizing chart. Now, some things I want to call out with these sleeves, even though they are on the longer side, they are on the lighter side as well. So the average weight for these across sleeves was 3/4 pounds. So they are some of the lighter sleeves that we're going to be looking at today. The price point is still what I would consider on the higher end at $124. And these sleeves, while good in my opinion, if you're looking for a traditional tapered type sleeve, I think there are better options, and we're going to be talking about those in just a minute. All right, so the next one I want to talk about is a little bit of an interesting one. This is the A7 Hourglass knee sleeve. So it's not really the same as some of the knee contours, but also it's not really the same as some of the traditional taper. It's kind of a hybrid of both. So this kind of stands alone in a category, has a dual seam in the back, and it kind of flares out some in the back. But if you take a look at it, it still looks almost like a traditional taper-ish up front, or more of an hourglass shape. And I actually like these sleeves a lot. Taking a look at the length, again, they're right on point, about 11¼ inch long. The price point on these is also very appealing. They retail for $100. I really like that A7 offers the same sleeve in different stiffness levels. So each sleeve that they sell, there's 3 different levels of stiffness, this being the stiffest and most expensive. For me, these are a medium. They are a tad on the small size, but a large is too big for me in that regard. So shout out to Andre Easter, who is a very strong dude and just recently competed with me at Raw Nats. Side tangent, I gave him my size large just because I felt like they were a little bit big for me. These are a little bit on the smaller end, but I still can get them on and off and train in them. Now, where these fall a little bit short for me is the weight. So the weight on these is towards the bottom of what I would consider stiff sleeves. So on average, they're like the Iron Rebels, coming in at 3/4 pound in total. I've been liking some of my sleeves better that weigh more, and I think if these were just a little bit more dense potentially, I would like them more. They are a good sleeve overall, especially considering the price point, but they're just not my current go-to sleeve. All right, so next I want to talk about the Cerberus Strength knee sleeves. And again, taking a look at some of the specs here, it's interesting that these sleeves for a long time were my go-to preferred sleeves. And I say that because they're about average on overall length, being 11¼ inch. They weren't the heaviest or densest sleeves at 0.9 pounds each, and they weren't the cheapest sleeves at $130. The sizing on these were a 2XL, which are the biggest of any real sleeve that I currently use day in and day out, but they just fit my leg the best. So even though they weren't the most dense, they weren't the most stiff, they weren't the longest, they weren't the cheapest, I felt the best wearing these, and these were my go-to for quite a while. Now, the downsides here of these is the weight coming in at 0.9 pounds for a lot of people, and even the price being $130. They are on the more expensive side. The issue with these now, however, from what I can see, is Cerberus Strength is not currently selling these. I believe they're having to redo them based off of some issues they've had with another brand. But these were very good sleeves for a long time, despite the fact that, again, they weren't the longest, they weren't the heaviest, they weren't the cheapest. but the fit on these was the best. And again, that's one of the things that I'm trying to provide with you guys here, is as much information as possible to make the best informed decision for you. All right, so the next sleeve I want to talk about, I don't think I've done a good job talking about these on my channel previously, so these might be the first time you've heard or seen of them, and that is these sleeves from Augment, which is an Australian-based company, and I actually like these quite a lot. Taking a look at some of the specs, they're right where I want on the length at 11 1/4. They're one of the heaviest sleeves I own, averaging out to 1.175 pounds across the board. The price on these is attractive, $95 US, and these ones are a size medium. And I like the way they look. It's black, it's white, it's aesthetically one of the better looking sleeves in my opinion. And I like these a lot, but the only issue I have with them is, kind of talking about the last sleeves we just talked about, is the sizing on these. So these mediums are probably too tight for me to use day in and day out. I do have a large as well, which tend to be a little bit too big. So I'm missing a little bit of that in between, but otherwise these are a really good option, especially if you're in Australia or can't get access to stiff sleeves, or again, if you're looking for a good bang for your buck, these are definitely up there. All right, so next sleeve we're gonna talk about are these ones from Pioneer, which are my personal favorite, which is why I saved them for last. Again, there is going to be some bias here because I've been working with Pioneer for a long time. I'm friendly with the owner. I helped him with some of the prototypes here. But let me talk about why I personally like these the best, and one of the reasons I wore them to compete at USAPL Raw Nationals this past weekend. So number one, these are the longest of any of the sleeves that I've showed you today, 11.375 inches. The weight is the second heaviest of any sleeve I've showed you, with the exception of the Augment sleeves that I've showed you as well. These ones in particular are a size extra large, and again, the visual aesthetic of these is right up my alley. It's black and it's white. I like these a lot, but perhaps one of the biggest reasons I think these are going to be a very popular sleeve, despite of all the fantastic specs I just went over, is the fact that they're priced so low. These sleeves are $75. Now, in comparison, a lot of the other sleeves we've talked about, we're looking at averages of like $110, $115. The Augment sleeves, which we previously looked at, were the cheapest up to this point at $95. These are $75. So in some cases, almost half the price of something like the Titan or the Inzers or the Cerberus. So there's a lot of value here. And for me, they fit my leg the best, and the value is just so good that I actually just recently bought a second pair. So these are fit pretty tight to my leg. Again, these are a size extra large. Use the sizing charts. And in some of my longer sessions or right after squats, I feel the need to take these off because I'm feeling them in my legs. I actually went out and bought a double XL for just more general training purposes and to give my legs a little bit of break. But I liked them so much, and the price point was so good that it was hard to say no. So again, at $75, really, really hard to beat. I don't think these really have a con other than if you're a big fan of Pioneer like I am. These are not made in the USA where everything else is, so take that for what it's worth. But all these sleeves that we're talking about today are all made overseas anyways, so it is what it is. All right, so those are the 9 sleeves that I own that I'm gonna cover. There are a couple of notable exceptions I just wanna talk about. Number one, the Go Strong sleeves, which to me are basically very similar to the Inzer or the Titan TKS sleeves. They have that knee contour. Obviously, I can't tell you about how much they weigh in particular or the price point, although I can flash that on the screen. But for me, one of the reasons I didn't pick that up is because, again, that shape of knee sleeve just never really fit me too well. The other two notable ones that come to top of mind when I talk about sleeves are the Oni sleeves, which have a really interesting design, which looks like they flare out significantly at the top and look pretty narrow down below. Just haven't come across those yet. And finally, the last sleeve are the Helix knee sleeves, which are interesting as they have a stitch going across the front, similar to like maybe what we've seen with the yellow jackets from Titan in the past. So those are the sleeves that I haven't mentioned in this video, but at the end of the day, these 9 sleeves cost me a lot of money and I just don't want any more. I'm good. I don't want to have to keep opening Pandora's box, but hopefully when you're making that decision of which knee sleeve is right for you, the numbers and the context which I provided based off of your leg shape, the sizing chart, the pricing and all that, help you make a better informed decision. If so, let me know by leaving a like below and a comment if you want. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching, appreciate it, and stay big.